You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Derek Chauvin, the white former police officer who was convicted of murdering George Floyd, learned his fate today and how long he is going to spend time in prison. This is what the judge announced.
I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases. And so, Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury, finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything from the defense? All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Prior to the sentencing, the family had an opportunity to offer their victims' comments to the court. The powerful video of George Floyd's daughter, Gianna.
What do you miss most about your daddy?
Well, I ask about him all the time. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. Well, when you ask about him, what are you asking about?
Well, I was asking, how did my dad get hurt?
Do you wish that he was still here with us?
Yeah, but he is.
Through his spirit?
Yes.
Yes. And when you see your daddy again one day, what do you want to do when you see him?
I want to play with him.
What kind of games do you want to play with him?
I want to play with him, have fun, go on a plane ride, and that's it.
Yeah. Would you?
We used to have dinner meals every single night before we went to bed. My daddy always used to help me brush my teeth.
Oh. Do you miss him helping brush your teeth?
Yes.
How do you hope that the world remembers him?
Well, they help him because those mean people did something to him.
Unbelievably sad. Unbelievably sad. Folks, we are joined here in Chicago. Anisha Ramsey is going to be hanging with me, co-host for the day, journalist based out of St. Louis. Also, next to her, Kimberly Fox. She is Cook County State's attorney, a familiar person to this show. Alexandra Sims, political consultant, CEO, APS and Associates, and also Xavier Ramey, CEO for Justice Informed. We're going to kick this thing off by going to Minneapolis, where journalist Georgia Forte was in the courtroom. Georgia, welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. Describe for us what it was like. Obviously, Chauvin was convicted. This was a lot different than when the verdict came down when he was convicted. But what was it like there, folks waiting to hear about the sentence for the death of George Floyd?
Well, there was a lot of anticipation leading up to the sentencing of Derek Chauvin. And actually being in the courtroom today, I'll say it was very intense. Not only was Derek Chauvin's mother inside the courtroom, you guys heard from her, but also his ex-wife and her two sons were there as well. On the other side of the courtroom was Floyd's family, his brothers, as well as Attorney Crump and Tony Ramanucci. And so the courtroom was full, and everybody was, for the most part, anticipating that Derek Chauvin was going to get more than 22 and a half years. In fact, when it came out that he was getting 270 months, I received some text messages from folks who were outside, since I was inside the courtroom, saying that people were very upset on the street. They felt like he should have gotten the maximum sentence. We heard from all four of the victim impact statements that everyone thought he should have gotten that. And that was backed up by the prosecution with all of the different aggregating factors. We heard Attorney Frank go through the fact that there were children who were present when Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd. We heard him go through the fact that there were accomplices. This is not something Derek Chauvin necessarily did by himself. And the duration of the use of excessive force also played in and contributed to them saying that these were aggregating factors. On the other hand, Attorney Nelson, the defense attorney for Derek Chauvin, we already know he, every step of the way, has tried to get this case dismissed. He's asked for a mistrial. Even today, his request for a new trial was declined by the judge. He was asking for probation. He said, look, my client doesn't have any criminal history. You should consider that. And the part, Roland, I think for me, that was the hardest to sit through. Because at the end of the day, yes, I'm a journalist, but I'm also biracial, and I identify very strongly with my Black heritage. It was very challenging to listen to Derek Chauvin's mother make these remarks about his career and talk about even his accolades and the fact that when she pinned his badge on, it was her happiest moment in her life. And it felt a little out of place, out of context for that moment. But what I will say is what I'm hearing from other people who have analyzed that statement is it kind of felt like a dog whistle. The last thing I'll say is people were not expecting Chauvin to say anything at all. He did offer condolences to the family. And then he also made this very weird remark that no one was really sure what he was referencing. After he offered his condolences, he told the Floyd family that there was some information that would be coming out that would bring them peace. And whether that was the sentencing he was alluding to, or whether he's talking about the DOJ investigation, no one really quite knows exactly what Derek Chauvin meant when he said that to the Floyd family.
This entire trial for a lot of people has been traumatic. I mean, to see the Floyd family go up there again, and I thought it was really important that they had all of the brothers of George Floyd telling the judge, pleading to the judge for the maximum penalty, and listening to Gianna. I mean, it really just broke my heart personally. However, I feel like when the judge heard their pleas, it was kind of this waver in between of, well, let's be fair, but also let's give them some justice as well. And I feel like the verdict with the 22.5 years, I mean, it's possible that Derek Chauvin should have got the maximum.
Georgia, on that particular point, how did the courtroom respond to that video from Gianna?
Well, I'll tell you, George Floyd's brothers were in the back of the courtroom with tissue. They were crying. Every time I looked over, they were wiping their eyes. And I know that these are nuances that aren't necessarily picked up on camera. While on the other hand, Chauvin's family, they were very still and only spoke a few times. But you could tell just in you can see somebody's stress in their eyebrows. They were often looking down, some of them turning red. So there was some anger and some shame. You could even see the shame on their faces. So it was a very emotional and intense time to be inside of that courtroom today.
Georgia Forte, journalist there in Minneapolis. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much for that perspective. Thanks a bunch. Kim, I want to start with you. A lot of people really don't understand the law. Folks have assumptions. People say he should have gotten more. Also not realizing that states differ in terms of how much time you have to serve. So already people are saying, oh, he's only going to serve 15 years, where other states sometimes you have to serve 85% of the sentence. And so just explain to folks watching just the nuances in how the law works, and you have to understand it depends on the state you're in.
That's right. It is state specific. So we're looking at Minnesota law. And what he was looking at was a range that was from probation, which is what his attorney was asking for, up to 30 years. And that 30 years included what we call aggravating factors. So it's not just that he killed someone, but these aggravating factors made it even more egregious. The fact that he did this in front of a child, the fact that he was a law enforcement officer, and we have higher expectations for them. And so those are the factors that a judge is supposed to look at. What is the crime? What are the penalties that we can assess? And what are the aggravations? So this made it more heinous, or mitigation. So mitigation is he's never been arrested before. He was in law enforcement. He had, what are the things that should make his sentence even more light? And so it depends on the state. Here in Chicago, you'll recall we had an officer involved murder involving Jason Van Dyke,
right,
in the killing of Laquan McDonald,
right,
on video, shooting this young man 16 times as he lay on the ground. I don't think you could think of anything more egregious than what we saw in that video, and yet Jason Van Dyke is only serving 6.5 years. And so you see the wide disparities that happen. Under Illinois law, he could have been sentenced to far more. And so this 22.5 years will never feel like justice. I don't know that justice is anything less than Gianna having her father with her, but it's why we see the disparities of a Laquan McDonald murder only getting 6.5 years to George Floyd getting 22.5.
Alexandra, one of the things that I have, I was doing a radio a little bit earlier that I've been trying to explain to folks as well. A lot of folks have been saying, okay, not justice. But the reality is that the power of the protest, they have made a difference, because I dare say you can't recall in the last 2 years the number of police officers that have actually been convicted. We're talking about before, they wouldn't even go to trial. They wouldn't get indicted. And so you are seeing a shift in the consciousness of grand juries, but also this is the impact of having different DAs.
Oh, yeah. I think prosecutors across our country, so I think not only has this case shook our entire country, I think being locked down and COVID brought attention to this case. So everyone had to watch and see racism in their face. But then you see, prosecutors like our state's attorney here. You see him across other women like Miss Gianna out in Orlando. You see Rachel Roland. You see a bunch of progressive prosecutors being elected to push, because that's important roles, right? Those are important roles that really mean a lot in times like this, right? And I think that I also want to give credit to millennials. I think that millennials have stepped into these roles and have done protests weeks after weeks after weeks. Just this week here in Chicago, we had a protest, and I think that without this terrible situation, this terrible case, we wouldn't have brought light to that, and that's when you see progress. And, you see convictions, but you need laws to change also, right? So prosecutors can get you to one step, but there's use of force laws that really protect officers. And I can't say that enough, not only in Illinois, but across the entire country. So not until we change some of the police officer Bill of Rights can we really move forward.
Well, Xavier, that's why I think the nuances of the law makes a difference. And what I mean by that is, what people are learning is that, because before it was, all the focus was on Congress. And you're sitting there going, but they can't change a state law. Then it became, okay, well, let's focus on state legislatures and governors. Well, but they don't control, they're not the judge, or they might not be the DA. People now, I think, are understanding civics a lot better and realize that there are multiple touch points that you have to deal with when you're talking about dealing with this. You must deal with the police union contracts with the cities. You must deal with the Bill of Rights. You must so it's like there's all kind of different pieces to it. There's no one way to have police reform in America.
Yeah, what you're pointing to is something I call the ecosystem of justice work. It happens with many different people, many different touch points, and often across the arc of time. The reality.
They can't hear you for some reason, so let's just bar that microphone there, and let's fix that problem.
Yeah, what you're alluding to is what I would call the ecosystem of justice work. That a lot of this work happens across many different people, across time, variances in state law and such. The reality is that what you're talking about is a question of how do we actually achieve justice? Like, what is justice? How do we keep black people safe? How do we actually ensure safety in our communities? And the question of the apparatus of that, I think, is at the core of the question of police reform, and it starts with the question of police, right? At the core of the marches last year, and what really rose up was this conversation around the viability and the necessity of police officers as a measure and a powerful meaning maker for safety. Particularly as it relates to black and brown people. And I think what's been lost in the conversation, and even in the sentencing that we saw today, what's been lost in that conversation is this question around what really is justice, what actually would bring George Floyd home, meaning would have prevented his death, and at no point would that be 22 and a half years or 100 years. At no point would that have been a police officer. It would have been an ecosystem and network of relationships, distribution of economic resources, the question of permissibility, the reduction of bias as it relates to anti-blackness, and these sorts of things. But it happens, and it's every individual's job, which makes it difficult, and it's every system's job, which makes it even more complex.
Okay, well, I have a question for you. We talked about the varying degrees of sentencing. So you have the larger scale, then you have a lesser scale. How much of this was the public opinion for us to see this outcome of Derek Chauvin getting the sentencing he did from a judge?
Listen, the judge said, that he wasn't taking any of that into account. He was looking at the specific facts and the law and taking out emotion. But I would be hard-pressed to say that this judge knew not just that Minneapolis was watching, the world was watching, and that there had been this outcry that he could not give the minimum. I mean, and the other thing that we should point out, that even with the heartfelt sentiments of George Floyd's daughter and all of the other impact statements, he'd already had this ruling done. He had his 22 pages when he sat down at that bench. He
didn't go in chambers and bang out 22 pages.
No, he had it ready. And so while those statements, were impactful for us, they weren't changing where he was. But I certainly believe, again, based on history just here in Chicago, where Jason Van Dyke can shoot someone 16 times and get 6.5 years, and there was, this to the point you made, Roland, there's a sense of like, we got something. And what we have seen in the course of the last several years with this persistent pressure, with this persistent, that's not enough either.
Right.
And so I think we have seen that shift, and I think that shift is because the laws haven't changed. It is the expectation and the accountability to the public that has changed. And I think that's how you go to 22 and a half years, which doesn't feel like a lot, but it is a lot in the history and trajectory of what we've seen in these types of cases.
Let's be real clear, okay? 22 and a half years is a hell of a long time when we have seen police officers get no billed, when the grand jury has no indictment whatsoever. And I know people are saying, you shouldn't accept that. But the reality is what you are seeing. You're seeing a dramatic shift. And I can guarantee you that there are police officers who saw this verdict, and they are thinking a little differently tonight when they go out and hit those streets and how they interact with people, because more folks are videotaping, now because you have more cities that are passing or implementing body cam footage, now when that cop lies and then that footage shows something totally different, it's no longer I can just say whatever I want on that police report and then the courts believe it and then everybody believes it and the public goes, hey, well, that's what the cop said. Now all of a sudden it's kind of like, no, we're going to show you this.
And you're hearing stories about record numbers of police officers retiring.
Right.
Like even here in Chicago.
Which is not a bad thing.
Here in Chicago, we've heard they're resigning. They're saying that this is a different atmosphere, and that atmosphere of accountability is what we want. And to me, if you can't do the job without worrying about a camera, then it's probably good that you get that clock and see yourself to your retirement.
And that's what I'm saying. I see these job openings as an opportunity. When we talk about reform police departments, yes, to get rid of, and I have no problem saying it, police thugs, and to be able to go out and recruit a different type of 21st century police officer to patrol communities.
Yeah, there's a law I learned about recently, and it's about, when an officer, commits a crime or kills an individual, a regular civilian.
Okay, all right, so hold on one second. So there's an issue with this microphone they can't hear, so let's switch. So pass that microphone down to me. Just pass it down to me, that one right there. All right, y'all come get this and fix it, please.
When an officer kills a civilian, for example, here in Illinois, they have almost 48 hours of time in between when they kill the civilian to prepare their statements. And that's an example of an advantage.
Like, you and I wouldn't get 48 hours.
Not at all.
To get your life straight.
Right.
To get your life straight.
Right.
And that's something that you can have the best prosecutor in the state ready or in your account. That's something that they're protected under. So those are types of laws that have to change eventually.
Back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. Steve got all these jobs, got all this money, got all these awards. He talk about God and the Lord and his wife all the time. So he was over here talking, and his wife was there, and I knew it was his wife, so I walked up behind her and gave a kiss on the cheek. The projects in Steve came out in about 10 seconds, because he was like, I'm hearing some kissing over here. Who the hell is kissing my wife?
Well, Roland, you leaned into and you was doing here just to aggravate me, and I heard it out my ear, and I went, okay, man, I don't know who this brother is, but Essence is about to be different. And I spun, and it was the ignorant Roland Mark messing with me. But hey, man, you know how I feel about that girl. So it was quite interesting, and I had to apologize because the CEO of Essence was standing right there, and me and Roland almost turned the festival out. It would have been quite different.
Now, speaking of turn the festival, we also are always on our pocket square game. Always.
Now, I got to give Roland credit. We always battling each other for the different looks. Pocket squares is something we kind of specialize in. We try to make it. This is topping the game right now. This I've never seen. I will be stealing this look. As soon as I find the people from out of this country that he bought this stuff from, and I get a proper email, I'll be sending to China or wherever he bought Japan or Yugoslavia, wherever they made this, and I will be looking. That is hot. I got to give it to you. That's the best pocket square I've ever seen.
Now, last piece. Steve is a big golfer. I'm a big golfer. So when we going to have this golfing brothers thing?
See, Roland, you're trying to talk me into something that you've been doing a lot longer than I. So you've been playing golf since college.
I took it as my PE at Texas A&M in '87.
See, right there, I picked up golf after Tiger won the Masters. And then I bought a set of clubs and played with a custom set of clubs for 5 years without a lesson. I can't tell you the bad stuff I've ingrained into this swing. I just now started going over the top. I just cut that out. So, and I'm playing good though. I'm playing good for me. Well, what's your best score?
77.
That'll never happen here.
Well, Rodney Green is working with him. He's our good friend as well. But
77. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm taking a full page ad out in the USA Today.
All right, folks, don't forget this Friday, the virtual festival, Essence Fest Live Loud Virtual Festival begins this Friday. You can go to essencestudio.com, essence.com. The virtual festival will take place Friday through Sunday, and then, of course, it takes place again next weekend, July 2nd through the 4th. On Monday, we're going to have a recap of the first weekend of the virtual festival. And then, of course, on July 5th, we're going to have a recap of the second weekend.